Today we are going to make Filets de Poisson Gratinés à la Parisienne from Mastering the Art of French Cooking Volume 1. Mastering the Art of French Cooking is a legendary cookbook in the history of the genre and is a book that really launched Julia Child into the public spotlight of American cuisine and brought French cuisine into everyone's home and gave them the ability to have sort of fancier cuisine at home than the sort of more rustic cooking that they had previously. This is a very old cookbook. It was first published in 1961. It has no pictures and only some rudimentary instructional illustrations. But I personally love to cook from old cookbooks like this, where there isn't much in the way of social media content illustrating the recipe. Uh, I recently made another recipe from this book called La Marly, which is a French brioche version of strawberry shortcake. Um, and maybe I'll do a video on that one eventually as well because it came out really delicious. So this book has both volumes 1 and 2, which are different books with different recipes in them. Now they're currently sold in a nice reprinted box set that you can buy. If you're interested in buying this book to try out this recipe or any of the other recipes I mentioned, or just want to check it out yourself, I've included a link in the description of the video. So this recipe that we're doing today is sort of exactly what I think of whenever you're watching a Gordon Ramsay show and he says something is dated or it looks old-fashioned. This is a very old-fashioned recipe. It's a product of its time, and it's something for those of you who are a little bit older. It's something I would have remembered being on like a nice restaurant's menu in like 1989, before the internet and before presentation became as prominent and as refined as it is today. So it doesn't mean it's not delicious. It just means that it's not a modern looking dish in its presentation. So what it is essentially a white fish fillet poached in wine and stock, which makes it very fragrant. Your kitchen is going to smell really good. And then it's covered in what's called a sauce Parisienne. And this is also known as a lende sauce. And it's a cousin of the French veloute sauce as well. It's a very versatile sauce that can go on top of a lot of things. I would definitely put this on top of vegetables, put this on top of fish, chicken, anything you'd want to. And it tastes really good. And then it's finished with a Swiss cheese crust in the broiler. I know, fish and cheese. You're just going to have to trust me that this tastes good, but it does. So let's go ahead and get started. The first step in this recipe is poaching the fish. In order to do that, we'll need the following setup. We have fresh flounder fillets, salt and pepper, dry white wine, rich seafood stock, cubed butter, chopped shallots, and an oven-safe dish that's capable of going both on the stove and in the oven, as those will both be necessary in this recipe. So let's go ahead and open up our dish here, and you want to take about half of these shallots and just sprinkle all over the bottom of the pan and get them nice and spread out there. We'll do a few more, and we'll still do a few more beyond that. Okay, then we're going to want to go ahead and layer our fish fillets on top of those shallots. And we're going to want to lightly season with some salt and pepper, but just a little bit. This is not, this is not Mexican or some other strong, or Indian or some other strong aromatic or seasoned flavored dish. European flavors I find are a lot more subtle because a lot of the spices that we have in that area of the world natively are not the strong spices that we affiliate with other cuisines. So we want just a little bit of salt on top of that. And then we can go ahead and put the rest of the shallots over the top of the fish. Let's go ahead and get all the rest of these in there. While you're doing this, you definitely want to go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees also. And then we can go ahead and put the dots of butter over the top of that. You want to try to space these out as much as you can. Then we're going to want to put our dry white wine and pour that over the top of this. And then our seafood stock over the top of that. And we want to make sure that the fish, that when we're done here, that the fish are completely covered in liquid. If there's still some fish poking out, that's why I have just a little bit of supplementary water here, just to get our liquid levels up just a little bit higher here until we get it completely submerged. All right, there we go. All right, I'll see you at the next step. Now the next step in this dish is to actually poach the fish. So I have the container here on the stove. It is on medium so that we want it to simmer. We don't want it to boil. Once it just begins to simmer and it gets really warm, then we're going to take this and we're going to put it in the bottom of the oven, which is already heated at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll see here over on the right, we also have a buttered piece of parchment paper. And what's going to happen with that is once this container of fish reaches its simmering temperature, this buttered parchment is going to go on top of the fish in order to sort of seal in those flavors and those aromatics as we proceed to the next step. Okay, our fish is poached, and you can see here it's under its paper. So we want to just go ahead and take that off. And set that aside for the moment. And get our spatula here. And we want to take this fish out. Go ahead and just take it out one piece at a time here. Ooh, that's nice and flaky. You can see I kind of messed that piece up there, but that's all right because we're just cooking for ourselves, not for anyone else. Let's go ahead and we'll set those aside. I think I got a little bit more here. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take, first of all, we want to cover the fish back up in their paper because we are not done with them yet and we want them to stay warm. And the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to strain this into, I'm going to strain this liquid into this pot here, get the solids out of it and just boil it down. And in the meantime, we will go ahead and turn that up. Now you really want this to boil and reduce. So go ahead and just put your oven on high, and you want this to reduce down to about a cup, but you want it to get a lot thicker than when it comes out. And we will move on to the next step after I wait for this pot to boil. Okay, we've got our liquid from poaching the fish boiling here, and the next step is we want to take butter and go ahead and get that in this pan and melt. And for those of you who may be familiar with Cajun cooking, we're going to make a roux, which it's no surprise that Cajun and French cooking share this similarity in that they like to use roux, since Louisiana was originally a French colony before it became part of America. Let's take a look here. Yeah, that's getting close to being done, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off of that. And this is going here. And so what we want to do here is let this get fully melted first, and once this butter gets melted, we are going to throw in some flour, and that's going to seize up here and become a very thick, almost like paste, and that forms the basis for a lot of very good things in cooking, like gumbo and like sauces and like this recipe. You also see why this type of cooking lends itself to just cooking for one or two people, especially if you're on like a weeknight or after work and you've got a lot going on. This is not something that you would be making for a family of 4 in most cases. All right. That's also why I kind of view Mastering the Art of French Cooking as not a it is a comprehensive book, and there's volumes 1 and volumes 2, but it's not something I would tell people to begin with. It's really not laid out in a way that's intuitive to a lot of people. And okay, now we go ahead and throw in our flour. Let's go ahead and get the rest of that in there. Yeah, there we go. You can see how it's starting to form that paste already. And we don't have this on a super high temperature because flour and butter absolutely will burn. We do want it to brown a little bit, but we don't really want it to burn. And it's going to form this kind of slurry. This is actually a similar methodology to when you are making milk bread, which is an Asian cuisine, obviously, and not French or Cajun. All right, so this is going to go for a couple minutes here. We want it to bubble just a little bit, but we don't want it to, like I said, just make sure you keep an eye on it, because roux absolutely can burn, and then you will, they carry such a strong flavor that you will absolutely just taste nothing but burning in your food, or burnt like smoke, or yes, an unappetizing flavor. Okay, you can see there it's starting to bubble up a little bit. Now you're going to need a wire whisk for this next part, because let's see if we can get that. Yeah, look at that good bubbling that's going on there. That's what you want to see in a roux, in a recipe like this. You're going to need, this is a wire whisk, and you're going to need this in just a minute here, because we're going to, after this roux is ready, we're going to add the liquid and other things into it to make the sauce. I will say, you definitely want to take your time with roux and make sure they're ready before you go ahead and start adding things, because you can do it underdone and then your food just tastes like flour. It'll be fine. It can be forgiving to some extent, but it just doesn't taste as good as it could be if you really let the roux develop flavors. Let that butter brown, let that flour cook. And so when flour cooks, it starts to lose a little bit of that just tasting like flour in your food. Okay. All right, I think that's ready. So we want to go ahead and move and add in the stock, but we don't want this to continue to cook while we add in stock. So we're going to take this off of heat. Make sure you turn your stove off, before you do this. And so we'll go ahead and add the stock in here. And we're just going to want to beat this until it gets nice and smooth. You'll notice that a roux, yeah, see how nice and thick that is? That's how you know you've done a lot of this right, is when you get this nice thick, almost like custard texture to your roux, or to your sauce. At this point, it's no longer just a roux. And this is also why you want to make sure you do this off heat, because if you did this on the heat, again, it would increase the likelihood that this would burn. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add milk, and then we're going to put it back on the heat. Now the sauce is going to be very thick at this step. Okay, let's go ahead and get our milk in there. And we can go ahead and put you back on the heat. I'm cooking this at medium, by the way. When it comes to sauces like this, you definitely can overdo it on the heat, so you don't want to have the oven or the stove be really hot like you do for certain other things, like cooking tortillas. You want a really hot cooking surface. All right. So you can see it's not as dense as it was when I just added the stock. Now that it's just now that we've added in the milk, it's thinned it out just a little bit, but you can still see the streaks in there. That's the kind of thickness that you're looking for in a sauce like this. Okay, we're going to let that go for a second. Now, the next thing we're going to do is you're going to need a mixing bowl, and we're going to put in some egg yolks. One of those pops, but that's okay. And we're going to put in some heavy cream. And we're going to whisk this together. And we're going to do something that is another thing that just takes time in order to do it correctly. But the purpose for this is what's called tempering the eggs. And the reason that tempering the eggs is important is because if you just apply heat directly to eggs, then you get like breakfast scrambled eggs or a fried egg, and you don't get a nice luxurious silky sauce. Alright, so we'll put that together there. Now we are going to need a spoon, and what we're going to do actually is I'm going to keep whisking this, and we're just going to put a little bit of the sauce in a little bit at a time here. And what this does is it stops the eggs from just becoming solid cooked eggs by adding bit by bit, and you definitely can't go too fast. So just doing it the way that I'm doing it right here is the way you really want to go. Especially if you're a beginner. If you're a professional chef, I'm not going to tell you how to do your business. You've probably done this so many times that you don't even need. You certainly don't need my advice. You want to keep doing this until you've added about a cup worth of the hot sauce into the, and I'm making a little bit of a mess, but this is a home cooking channel, it's fine. As long as you clean up after yourself. But this is the pace you want to go. A lot of custards for pies are also made using this method, because you want it to be solid, but you don't want it to be solid right away. Or you want it to be solider anyway than it is. Alright, we're getting close now to where we can move on to the next step of this. You can see that the sauce is starting to bubble a little bit, so I don't want that to continue on for too long before I move on to the next step here. Okay, that should be pretty good. All right, so the next thing we want to do is go ahead and put the blended yolk and cream mixture in with the rest of the sauce, and then let that cook just a little bit while continuing to blend. So definitely stir. Always stir. The stirring is also what helps stop the eggs from setting. And those yolks in here will also kind of bring about more thickness into the sauce as well. Let's get a little bit of those good bits out of there. Turn up the heat on the stove a little bit, because at this point we do actually want the sauce to boil and thicken just a little bit. And we'll start preparing. We're going to season the sauce, because if you were to taste this right now, it probably wouldn't taste all that great. So we're going to need some white pepper. We're going to need salt. And we're going to need lemon juice. Now, be super careful with lemon juice in sauces like this, because in my experience, lemon can cause curdling and other things that are undesirable, so you definitely want to go light with the lemon juice. And as with many older cookbooks, Mastering the Art of French Cooking does not really specify a lot of these seasonings. It always just says to taste, which that's pretty common with salt and pepper. But personally, I would prefer it if for things like lemon juice that can be problematic, they would actually include quantity or a recommended quantity. All right, you can see how velvety and silky that that sauce is getting here. So it's getting close, but I think it's thick enough now. We can go ahead and add some white pepper, which is a very nice seasoning. It's not horribly common in American cuisine, and not nearly as much as it is in European. Well, again, in generic sort of bland American food, it's not all that common. You know, it's used frequently in Cajun food and other regional cuisines. All right, and always taste to make sure that what you're doing actually tastes good, and you haven't added too much of anything. If you're a beginner cook too, a lot of times you'll make some of these recipes, or you'll sort of just eyeball a recipe and you'll put a lot of salt in there thinking that the issue is that you don't have enough salt. And really, again, this is not really something for people who cook a lot, but for if you're a beginner, a lot of times what you're missing actually is an acid. So the lemon juice kind of takes the salts to a whole nother flavor, or makes the salt, reacts with it chemically to add another dimension of flavor to your food. Okay, that tastes pretty good. Let's get just a few drops of lemon juice in here. Okay, I'm not really going to go more than that. You can see as we've been going here, the sauce continues to get thicker too. A lot of the instructions say, oh, you know, cook it until it coats the back of a spoon, and you know, I guess before the internet, that was a useful measure, but I find, you know, on platforms like YouTube, when you can actually see what it's supposed to look like, that helps a ton in understanding and learning how to cook correctly. All right, let's do one more taste here. That came out really good. Okay, we're going to go ahead and turn off the heat for that now. And so the next thing we want to do is turn on the broiler on the oven. And let's go ahead and start that. Let's move this out of the way. And I've cleaned up. I know the fish, when I took it out of the container earlier, didn't look all the best. So I cleaned up the presentation a little bit off camera there. And what we want to do at this point is spoon this sauce over the fish. Okay. And I realized that I made a lot more sauce than I have fish. Part of that is because I'm just cooking for myself tonight. And so, you know, a lot of the times you would need significantly more if you were cooking for a family of 4, or, you know, entertaining for a party and you want to make something that looks fancy or that tastes fancy. So, okay, we added that sauce, and then the last thing that we do to finish out this recipe is we are going to dot a little bit of butter over the top. And then we are going to shred some Swiss cheese. So let's go ahead and get that. And that's going to give this a nice, I like a lot of cheese, but that's going to give this a nice brown coating after we briefly put it in the broiler here. Let's go ahead and get that butter back on top. Okay, this is going to go in the broiler, and then I will be back and show you guys the final result. All right, guys, and that is it after it came out of the broiler here. So this is the dish. I garnished it with a little bit of rosemary just because I like the citrusy complement of rosemary. I'll crumble that in as I eat this. But that's it. Filet de Poisson Gratinés à la Parisienne. And for anyone out there who's French or French Canadian, I'm sure I completely butchered that. But if that looks good to you, go ahead and like, subscribe, and enjoy all the rest of my content, and hopefully I can bring you something you've never eaten before.